Welcome to USC Primetime Live here at the Voice of College Football. I'm Matt Zemek. He's Ethan Inman. So we begin our Tuesday game previews, or at least we continue them. Our Sunday show, which comes at you at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific, is the review. Our Tuesday show here is mostly preview, but of course, if you want to ask a question about the previous game, of course we'll field that question. And we remind you that if you want a second hour of Ethan and Matt, $150 in super chats. If you want a third hour of Ethan and Matt, we're here, we're ready, another $150 in super chats. So we always give you the free hour guaranteed every time you come here to the USC channel at the Voice of College Football. But if you want a second hour, you want a third hour, well, it's work. We need to be paid for the extra time. If we're going to work overtime, we need the super chat donations coming in. And so Sunday, for any of you who missed the show, we had a guy named Michael Richardson. Thank you, Michael, again. Came in with a $99 super chat. That's why we did a second hour. Now, we bent the rules a little bit. We say 150, but when someone drops a C note, like that person's expecting another hour. So we gave another hour. We remind you, we don't want really one person to feel the need to give 100, like 20 people giving $8. Like that's our ideal vision. Everyone spreads the wealth, kind of like the USC offense against Missouri State. Everyone gets a touch. Everyone contributes. Everyone feels part of this, and no one has to do too much individually. So that's how we can get this thing going into a second and third hour, Ethan and Matt, here at the Voice of College Football, without anyone having to, break the bank, open the wallet too much. Just like $8. 20 Trojans doing that. We can do this. Fight on, right? So without further ado, we are obviously welcoming Clay Helton back to Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum. So plenty on Georgia Southern. But first, over Labor Day weekend, the coaches and AP polls, they usually drop on Mondays during the season, but after the Labor Day weekend, they drop on Tuesdays. So we have a fresh pair of polls to look at. And Ethan, I know that you wanted to look at the AP poll in particular with USC.
Thanks, Matt. Sorry about that, guys. Yeah, I mean, the AP poll and the coaches poll as well, just both polls, really disrespecting USC. I mean, we've talked before on the show about how, neither of the polls you can really trust, especially this early in the season. But it's at this point, I just have no words anymore. And I don't know. I feel like I have learned to kind of, let the polls be, ignore the SEC bias, all that stuff. But this time it's just so egregious that I feel like I can't let it go by without saying something. So USC somehow goes down in the coaches poll. Don't ask me how that happened. And then they move up only one spot from 30 to 29 in the AP poll. In the AP poll, you have Indiana ranked ahead of them. And Indiana obviously kind of struggled and squeaked out a 27-14 win over Old Dominion, which, mind you, was a 5-7 team last year and 4-4 in conference. So they're a mediocre Sun Belt team. And Indiana somehow, because of that performance, deserves a ranking ahead of USC. Again, doesn't occur to me why. And then the most egregious, in my opinion, is you have Alabama still somehow ranked after losing 31-17 to a team that went 2-10 last year. Like, who are we kidding? I just don't because I just can't understand the double standard because, on one hand, it's like, okay, Alabama's been good in recent years. So we're doing the last year revisionist history stuff to put them, in the poll at the beginning of the season, whatever. But then we don't consider last season Florida State, and all of a sudden this is not as devastating of a loss. Florida State also vaults into number 14 in the poll just out of nowhere because they beat, Alabama because they're Alabama. The Nick Saban days are over. The poll voters need to give it up. They need to stop, acting as if Alabama is a top 5 team year in and year out. A loss like that to a team that went 2-10 a year ago should have vaulted them out of the AP poll. It makes no sense. Coaches poll as well. I mean, I don't know what the coaches are seeing either, but I mean, and it's not like Florida State put on some remarkable performance that should vault them up to 14th either. I mean, you have Thomas Castellanos, their new quarterback, completed 9 passes. Like 9 passes beat Alabama. So in what world does Alabama or Florida State deserve to be in the poll? I just don't. Again, considering last year and considering this year, I just don't see it. I don't see how you could have watched that football game and come away with either of those teams deserving to be ranked. Again, I think Florida State could prove it with a few more games on their resume, and surely Alabama theoretically could rebound. But I just don't think there's just no world in which this makes any sense to me. But and yeah, USC continues to stay disrespected despite the 73-13 win, most points that anybody has scored in nearly 100 years for USC. So despite all those offensive stars. And people talk about the competition, but again, the competition these teams are playing doesn't seem to factor in, and it's So maybe you have some additional thoughts, Matt. I assume they're very similar to mine, but just mind-boggling to me. This to me is just the worst example of SEC bias I've ever seen.
I love a good soapbox rant, not just because you delivered it really well, but because that's my wheelhouse as well. Ethan, you're basically half my age, more or less. And so, my sagely advice, I don't think you'll have a problem following it, is just tune out the polls and just enjoy the sport. It just makes life so much better. Because I used to get angry about polls. I used to get, really angry. I would get offended, I would be outraged. And, obviously I can still rant about polls, but it's more about, giving people a good product on camera here at the Voice of College Football. It's not as though I'm disturbed, in terms of going about my day. It's not like that. But a lot of college football fans are and have been, and they allow this thing to matter. They allow this thing to capture their emotions. And so, folks, it's not worth it, right? We know how the sausage is made. We know the things that go into this kind of thing. The particular detail, Ethan, that slays me in terms of your well-delivered rant is that FSU, Florida State beats Alabama, and so Alabama stays in the top 25 for no good, legitimate, valid reason other than it's Alabama, the label on the soup can, and so Florida State gets the rankings boost because we thought Alabama was good. So it's just like it's a self-fulfilling prophecy that you're always going to give certain teams, certain brand names, usually from the SEC, the benefit of the doubt. So if you beat that team, well, then obviously you're going to be ranked higher than various other teams. So yeah, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. So a team that's ranked very highly at the beginning of the season, the punishment for losing is a slap on the wrist. It's very slight. Whereas teams that are totally off the radar but play really well, fully do their job, they don't get the same boost. They don't get the same benefit of the doubt. So we know the deal. We know how this is done. To turn this to USC, hey, it does not matter that USC is or isn't ranked after week 1, after beating Missouri State. No one's playoff fate's being decided. No one's bowl destination is being determined. Right now it's just USC does what it needs to do, handles the things it can control, and in November, in mid-November, then we start to get interested. But we're 2.5 months away from mid-November, and USC has a lot of work to do to put itself in position to be considered for a playoff berth, to be considered for the Big Ten championship game, to be considered, for a New Year's Six spotlight game, all those prizes. The work will take care of itself. If USC puts in the work, then everything resolves itself, and that's just the way to view polls. Your team just needs to handle its business. And may I add that, in the BCS era, poll battles were really costly, and they carried more weight, because if you were number 3, sorry, you're locked out. You don't have a chance to play for a championship. USC obviously tasted the sting of that in 2003 where Oklahoma was viewed as the greatest team of all time. So even though the Sooners lost to Kansas State, Sooners still go to New Orleans for the Sugar Bowl against LSU. When of course, a USC team that blasted Oregon State should have been ranked ahead of Oklahoma, should have played LSU. So at least in the 12-team playoff era, you're not left outside the dance if you're number 3. And given the expansion from 4 teams to 12, you're not left outside the dance if you're number 5. So a lot more seats at the table, and that diminishes the significance of the polls. You don't have to be number 2. You can be number 6. You can be number 8. You're fine. And last year, Alabama as well as South Carolina and Ole Miss all left just outside the cut line. It's not as though you have a great argument when you say, well, darn it, we were number 12 instead of number 13, right? If that's the sliding scale, if that's the claim that you have to resort to, pretty weak sauce, right? We were 12 instead of 13. It's that is just a loser's argument. If you couldn't put that one to bed, being safely in the top 12, you have only yourself to blame. Alabama losing to Vanderbilt, Alabama losing to a not very good Oklahoma team. We know this. Alabama made its own bed and has to lie in it. So because of the 12-team playoff, right, we do not need to get into an uproar, in a tizzy about polls the way they used to. But Ethan, in terms of your analysis, in terms of dissecting how the sausage is made, the preconceived notions, the baked-in biases, you nailed it every step of the way. Before we get into Georgia Southern, anything else you have on the polls and any other really weird rankings, discrepancies, overweighting this team's win or underappreciating another team's win? Anything else for us?
Trojan Fight pointed out a great note in the chat. Texas A&M doesn't drop at all after struggling with UTSA. Very good point. Noticed that as well. And then another one that I noticed in the coaches poll was Tulane. Somehow Tulane is ranked ahead of USC in the coaches poll. And I mean, they beat Northwestern pretty decisively, 23-3, but that just discounts how terrible of a football team Northwestern is going to be. I mean, their quarterback threw 4 picks, and Retzloff, the new quarterback at Tulane, basically carried that team, and had all the yards, rushing and passing. It was which was only 250 total, so it was not like he had a 400-yard game. So yeah, and Retzloff is a guy obviously that just got to Tulane a couple months ago because of his whole scandal at BYU. So I don't know, seeing a guy come in and carry a team despite having not been there for very long, and beating up on, it's a better conference team, but it's Northwestern, that wouldn't exactly inspire confidence in me if I was a coach of another school who should know the ins and outs of the sport. But so it goes, I guess. This is no disrespect to Tulane. I actually think that they're one of the non-Power 4 teams that are the most likely to compete for the college football playoff. I think that they'll be solid, especially because the Mountain West has kind of, had a rough first couple of weeks. But yeah, it's just really, it's just another example of they haven't done anything. And in fact, they're not a program that should be trusted over USC anyway. So it's whatever. But yeah, we got more football to play, like you said, and I'm sure USC is going to change a lot of minds really quickly in the next few weeks.
Yeah, would not be surprised if Northwestern is in the cellar of the Big Ten Conference, referring to Tulane very easily beating Northwestern. Northwestern scoring just 3 points. Yeah, it does figure to be a long season in Evanston. All right, our man, our dude, Mr. Reliable, Jeff Rodriguez with the $10 super chat to get this thing started. The Voice of College Football, Jeff, we really thank you for your loyalty. We know that you appreciate what Ethan Inman brings to the table. Thank you. You're very generous. You're very loyal. We appreciate you being here all the time. I hope we say it enough. Thank you very much, Jeff Rodriguez. Are always in our corner here at USC Primetime Live. All right, Ethan. So now, hello, Helton. We welcome back Clay Helton to the Los Angeles Coliseum. It's going to be a fascinating scene. And I think the first question, like before we get into the game and the game plan and the X's and O's and who needs to touch the rock and what the keys are for the defense, first we just need to start off with, do you expect USC fans to boo Clay Helton? Should he be booed? So what do you think the reception is going to be? What do you think the reception should be? And this really gets into the Clay Helton era at USC and how we make sense of it now that we have a few years separation from it.
I'm going to start off by saying I don't think that they should boo him. I just don't think that, the Clay Helton era is obviously a disappointment. But I feel like, and I've seen this, there's been a lot of talk about this on Twitter today, and I've been following it pretty closely. And it seems like everybody understands that, like, Clay Helton was not a bad guy. Like, everybody seems to really appreciate who he was as a human being. And also everybody appreciates that he put his best foot forward for the program. That doesn't mean that he was the best fit for the program. That doesn't mean that the program should have kept him as long as they could have, because a lot of people are, kind of also chiming in and saying, the program should not have kept him as long as they did. So I feel like people, now a couple of years removed from 2021, when everybody was, up in arms and about firing him, and it was way overdue. I feel like now everybody kind of has calmed down a little bit and realizes, like, we have the Rose Bowl memories with Clay Helton. Like, he put his best foot forward. He was a great guy. All the players loved him in terms of, like, his personality and how he related to them. So, like, it's not, I don't think it shows I don't think it represents what most USC fans who have been diehard fans and, rooted for the team through the Helton era, what they really feel and value about him. So I hope that they don't. Could they? I don't think you're going to see a standing ovation. Like, I think we've just entered into such a hot take era of sports, and such a, very, like, fast-paced, highly, like, consumerist era where it's just like you want success and you want success now. And so, like, could I see a couple of, younger fans, students, or recently graduated students who have had a couple of beers already, like, booing him scattered throughout the stadium? I could see it happening. But again, I don't think that is the representative view of true USC fans. And I don't think that, he's going to get 70,000 people booing him on Saturday. And I think, most of the stadium is going to support him. And I think another thing that kind of adds another layer to this conversation is, I think that if there's anyone who deserves to feel a sort of competitive spirit against him, it's Lincoln Riley, just because of how, Lincoln Riley came in and had a lot of success, and then there's been kind of the backslide the past few years. And I feel like a lot of I've seen some talk on Twitter that was like, we basically just backslid to the mediocre Helton era, so why did we fire him in the first place, yada, yada, yada. So, if there's anyone who should wish the worst for Clay Helton on Saturday, it's Lincoln Riley. And, want to put up a 60 or 70, point victory on him, or, count as many points as you want to count, just to, really put a stamp in, we're in a better era now of USC football. But, I saw a quote from Lincoln Riley that just came out a couple hours ago after practice, and he was talking about just who Clay Helton is as a human being. And it seems like he really shares that same view as a lot of USC fans. He talked about golfing with him at Pebble Beach tournaments and just having really great conversations, and said that that's actually the main reason he looks forward to going to those tournaments. So, yeah, I mean, I think you can get all your frustrations out with him and with his era on the football field by cheering on, your own team, by cheering on the Trojans on Saturday, but definitely shouldn't boo him. And I don't think you're going to get more than a few scattered, younger, more hot take culture era fans that kind of lean into that idea.
I very much agree, and that's the sentiment of a lot of the folks in the chat, including Jeff Rodriguez, and he really puts it well. It would be classless to boo him, even though I couldn't stand him. And we couldn't stand him in terms of wins and losses, in terms of what he said in press conferences, pre and post game. But it just means he wasn't that great at his job. but that's not a reflection on who you are as a person. Like, we all try to be good at our jobs, and sometimes we fail, but that doesn't mean we're immoral, doesn't mean we have deficient character. It just meant that a particular job description with a particular skill set, well, we couldn't quite get where we wanted to go. We couldn't quite achieve what he hoped to. Like, we give things a try in this life. We just have this one chance to do something on this earth, and that means experimenting, that means risking, that means seeing what we can and can't do. And we learn through failure, right? We try to do something, we see how far we can reach, and the failures are what teach us how to either do things better or to seek a different path. And those different paths could lead us to a lot of wonderful experiences. It's happened for many people. It is part of life itself that learning from failure, that defines our lives. It defines who we become, how we evolve, what we're able to make of this life journey. So Clay Helton gave it a whirl at USC, and he failed, but it's not as though he installed himself. And this is a key point here. Someone else had to install him, right? And Aaron Boone, USC Trojan, okay? Here's a nice little comparison. Hal Steinbrenner, owner of the Yankees, and Brian Cashman, the GM, they keep him there. They could choose to fire Aaron Boone. They keep him there instead. It's not as though Aaron Boone is running the whole ship. He's running the team on the field, but he's not the boss of the whole operation. So there's a neat parallel, right, with USC. Pat Hayden installed him in 2015. And if you go back to 2015, there was the Pac-12 championship game against Christian McCaffrey and Stanford. So in a logical world, that would have been the audition for Clay Helton to become permanent USC head coach. But Pat Hayden names him the permanent coach before the game. And then USC gets its doors blown off by Stanford. And that just set the tone for the era. And of course, the era's one bright spot, the Clay Helton tenure's one mountaintop moment, Sam Darnold, who, Clay Helton didn't identify him as the starter at the beginning of 2016, but at least he made the change just in the nick of time to win 9 straight games, make the 2017 Rose Bowl, win it, and then come back the next year and win the Pac-12 championship, the only Pac-12 championship since the end of the Pete Carroll era. So actually, it's USC's only Pac-12 title because Pete Carroll coached in the Pac-10 era. So anyway, just to reinforce the point, it's not as though Clay Helton just became Emperor of Troy. No, someone had to appoint him to that post, and that someone was Pat Hayden. And then Lynn Swann, presided over the debacle of the post-Darnold era, and competent leadership would have gotten him out, but Lynn Swann was not very competent as an athletic director, very competent as an NFL and college player, Hall of Famer, but he wasn't good at everything. He wasn't good at administration, wasn't good at executive leadership. So yeah, it's not as though this was Clay Helton's fault. It was Clay Helton's fault USC didn't win, but it was the fault of Pat Hayden and Lynn Swann and just dysfunctional USC athletic department leadership that Clay Helton stayed on the job as long as he did. And so that is also why we shouldn't boo him. We should respect him, but then on the field, kick the crap out of Georgia Southern. That's the way to go. It's welcome, Clay. You're a good man. We're glad you're here. And now we're going to beat your butt by 50. That's just the way to do it. All right. So our friend Russ Campbell, another loyal watcher, listener here on the USC channel at the Voice of College Football, $5 super chat. Thank you so much, Russ. Russ says, as much as I'd love to boo the hell out of Helton, out of Sark, Kiffin, Riley, and Clay, only one of those guys got us a Rose Bowl. Very true. Very true. We're still waiting on it for Lincoln Riley. And Kiffin and Sark, they needed to go to training school, and they, of course, they did. It was the Nick Saban rehab facility in Tuscaloosa. Learned learned how to be a coach, learned how to be organized. And Kiffin also went to Florida Atlantic, got that group of 5 job that usually most young coaches need before they climb the ladder. Kiffin getting the Tennessee job in 2009, getting the USC job in 2010, like it was just before his time. He wasn't ready. Los Angeles sports fans will appreciate this comparison. Luke Walton, remember when Luke Walton got the Laker job? It was just so early in his career. Bide your time. Make sure that when you get your dream job, your crown jewel job in your coaching career, that you're fully ready for it. Luke Walton wasn't remotely ready for that. Like it's not just about getting your dream job. It's about knowing that you're ready, knowing that you're prepared, so that when the job opens up, if the timing's not right, spend several years in the salt mines, learn the ins and outs of your craft, and then there will be time 10 years, 12 years down the line to get your job at the time when you know that you're ready for it. So Clay Helton wasn't ready at USC. Lane Kiffin wasn't ready when he came to USC. Comparisons with Luke Walton and the Lakers. So Russ's point, it's entirely accurate. It's 100% true. Only Clay Helton got USC a Rose Bowl win. We could extend this and say, Ted Tolner got USC a Rose Bowl win, unlike Steve Sarkisian and Kiffin and Lincoln Riley. So we can kind of stretch that one out. It's one of the weird facts of college football and USC history. But Russ Campbell's point very much stands. All right, so we will get to the USC Georgia Southern matchup, but we also have to point out, setting the table for this game, is that Clay Helton just got his butt kicked by a former USC coach. We're talking about former USC linebacker coach Matt Entz, now the head coach at Fresno State. And just to kind of set the scene here, if you follow the betting lines, and I do, Mark Rogers does, a few other people do here at the Voice of College Football. Don't know if you noticed, but Georgia Southern at kickoff this past Saturday went off as a 1.5 point favorite over Fresno State on the road. Georgia Southern was minus 116 on the money line, Fresno State minus 104. So Georgia Southern was an outright money line and spread favorite at Fresno State, and Fresno State wins 42-14. It was no contest. So, like Matt Entz, remember, this guy won multiple FCS national championships. He knows what he's doing. Can we say the same for Clay Helton, or at least to the same degree? So, Ethan, Matt Entz mopping up the floor with Clay Helton. What an interesting little lead-in to now Clay Helton playing USC.
Yeah, it really is a really interesting lead-in, Matt, especially because, Clay Helton, I saw something that he's stayed in California this whole time. So, they flew in for the Fresno State game, and they've been in California practicing ever since. I don't know if this is 100% true. I'd have to confirm and see if this actually happened, but I saw something that he was taking the whole team to Disneyland. Again, don't take that with a grain of salt, because I'm not 100% certain that that's true. Wait till the photos come out, but I did see a rumor floating around there that was some of his plans for this week. But yeah, I don't really think in the first year of Matt Entz, Fresno State's going to, run away with the Mountain West. I don't even think that they're going to be one of the top 3 or 4 teams in the Mountain West, just based on how they looked against Kansas, because Fresno State in its past, has been one of the best, most competitive, most fun to watch, non-Power 5 teams. And they'll go in some of their better years, and they'll go on the road, and they'll, give those teams a scare, or they'll beat them. We know this from the last couple of years of the Pac-12 when Jake Haener was the quarterback, them going into the Rose Bowl and beating UCLA, them, taking Oregon State down to the wire, all that kind of stuff. So them getting just kind of completely, run amok by Kansas is not a good sign. And then their quarterback, EJ Warner, has just played pretty poorly. I understand why Matt Entz would want to install him, because he's like a really experienced guy. He's been around the block and I think this is his 4th or 5th season, and he's been to Temple and he's been to Rice. And so he's had a lot of starting experience, but he just really hasn't looked very good at all. In his 2 games, because Florida Fresno State played week 0 against Kansas, like I mentioned. He's 38 of 56 with 355 yards, no touchdowns, and 4 picks. So not very good numbers. And yeah, even against the Clay Helton-led Georgia Southern defense, just really wasn't getting anything going in the passing game. The really big story for Fresno State's offense and why they were able to put up so many points is that their run game just completely decimated Georgia Southern. 351 rush yards and 5 touchdowns on the ground. So just completely could not stop a sneeze in the run game at all. And again, it's a team that hasn't really looked incredible and is led by a quarterback that hasn't looked that great. So, if they could even, cut Fresno State down to half the yards and half the touchdowns, that puts them in the game, and half the yards and half the touchdowns on the ground, but couldn't do it. Surrendered 351 rush yards and 5 touchdowns. So given how USC's running back room has looked, that is should be a big emphasis this week. Because as USC fans have seen, it doesn't matter how bad Clay Helton's run defense looks in one week. He's not going to adjust the next week. He's just going to get run all over again. That's what happened, all of the last few seasons. So all of USC's running backs should be really looking at that stat line from, again, a team that has not looked fantastic, and be really salivating because it has the potential to be a really big day on the ground for sure.
All right, folks, plenty more USC football talk coming your way here on USC Primetime Live here at the Voice of College Football. But first, a word from our sponsor here at the VOCFB. We'll see you in a minute.
You can make a difference here at the Voice of College Football. Use the Amazon link. Financially contribute to the Voice of College Football without spending a penny. Same shopping experience. It's easy. Go to any video on any channel. Go to the description section and grab the link right next to the capital letters that say Amazon. Use that link and Amazon will instantaneously convert to your account, settings, history, everything intact, just like whatever link you use right now. No difference. Pay no attention to the product that you see right there. Just go search what you want. Don't forget the Amazon link. Thank you for your support. Sincerely, the Voice of College Football.
And Mark Rogers' show at the Voice of College Football comes at you Monday through Saturday, 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. in the West. So follow Mark Rogers' national show. Of course, you're watching USC Primetime Live right now. But after that, go to YouTube and you can get Mark's Tuesday night show. So follow him throughout the week. It's football season, so Mark Rogers is the busiest man in show business. All right, so now let's dig into this game. And so, Ethan, on the heels of what you just said about Georgia Southern's run defense being absolutely atrocious, to me, not just because of the favorable matchup, but also because of the dynamics of the season. And it's something that we talked about, Ethan, leading up to the Missouri State game. Game 1 is giving Jaden Mayava confidence, the foundation, making him know that, hey, I got this, I can do this, I can work within this offense, this system, this structure with my teammates and do really well. Box checked. Like that got accomplished in the Missouri State game. So if Jaden Mayava has that foundation now, Ethan, it seems to me that game 2, following up on game 1, now that you've given Mayava that foundation, game 2 should be all about pound the rock. Like this should be the simple, minimalist game plan. Nothing fancy, nothing vanilla in the playbook. No wrinkles, no exotics. Just stuff the ball right down Georgia Southern's face. And this is not about proving a point to Clay Helton. It's about shortening the game. It's about building up your offensive line. Like you've built up Jaden Mayava's confidence. Now you build up the offensive line's confidence. And you do this not only to shorten the game, but if you have Barry Odom at Purdue, he's going to be looking very closely at this game film in week 3 on September 13. Don't show your cards, right? Don't give Barry Odom anything. And more to the point, if USC, let's just a hypothetical, if USC runs for 500 yards against Georgia Southern, you know that Barry Odom and his staff at Purdue are going to say, we have to stop the run. We have to stop the run. Like that's all Purdue's going to say in the locker room. And what that does is that gives Lincoln Riley the ability to have some really fun, interesting pass plays, some misdirection concepts. So in other words, you play the Georgia Southern game in a minimalist way to set up more of your playbook, more possibilities, and more of Jaden Mayava, bringing him kind of back into the forefront against Purdue. Because that Purdue game, it's a little bit connected to the Georgia Southern game in that the way you prepare for one game can then set up how you prepare for the next one. It's kind of a two-game package. The Purdue game, given how well Purdue played in week 1 against Ball State, like this Purdue game doesn't seem like an automatic W. Yes, USC should definitely win, but I wouldn't quite chalk it up as like, oh, it's an automatic win. Kind of like, the way Rutgers was last season, the way Northwestern figures to be. No, Purdue might actually be decent, not very good, but, fundamentally competent enough that if USC trips over its shoelaces, that game could be troublesome. So, if in terms of USC breaking into the top 25 of the polls, to kind of go full circle, connect back to the start of the show, an authoritative win at Purdue would get USC squarely into the top 25. I don't think there's any question about it. What was the big problem with USC last season just in terms of results? Couldn't win a Big Ten road game in the Midwest, right? So if USC hammers Purdue, the rankings are going to begin to catch up with the reality of this team. But anyway, Ethan, I made my point about play this game in a minimalist way versus Georgia Southern so that you can set up the full playbook, or at least a lot more of the playbook against Purdue. And you're kind of thinking not just about this Saturday, but the road ahead.
Yeah, I think you make a lot of really great points, Matt. I'd just like to add a couple to the conversation. I think that that also allows you to kind of figure out your running back rotation a little bit more. I mean, everybody looked really great in that first game. And I think, like I said, after the first game, I think the depth chart is correct. Like, I don't think you're going to see too much more shuffling of the depth chart, but it allows you to figure out when to play which guys a little bit more and, see how these guys kind of behave in game. And because, you got 3 or 4 weapons in that running back room, all that you want to use in some of these Big Ten games. So just seeing how they can kind of handle shouldering the brunt of the offense's load, I think is worthwhile. The only argument I could see to the contrary to, letting Mayava throw the ball a bit more, if Lincoln Riley goes this way, kind of trying to get into his head a little bit, is because Georgia Southern has a slightly better pass defense than Missouri State, assumedly, given that, like I said, EJ Warner has not been good. But they kept Fresno State from a passing touchdown all game, and he didn't have a ton of yards either. All the yards, all the scoring was on the ground. So just if you're trying to kind of do this like soft on ramp of Mayava's confidence, where you have him play a team that was an FCS team a year ago, and then so their defense is maybe slightly above FCS quality. And then, the week after, maybe you have them play, okay, now you're playing a real FBS team now, and a team that shut down a quarterback who's played at the FBS level for a handful of years. And so you're going to, have to watch his film and watch what he did wrong. And now, watch back your film and figure out how to attack it, and it's going to be a little bit more challenging, and the defensive backs are going to be a little bit more athletic and a little bit smarter and, just slightly better at everything. And then you get to Purdue, and then it's slightly better. And then by the time you get to, in Illinois, one of the better teams in the conference, Michigan, then, he's realized, I can do it against Missouri State, and I can do it against Georgia Southern, and I can do it against Purdue, and I can do it against Michigan State. There's like this, almost like stepping stone thing. And again, it's also a way to put up quick points if you want to get more Husan Longstreet and the backups in the game. So those are the arguments I could see for just to play a little bit of devil's advocate for throwing the ball. But yeah, with the way the offense has kind of managed so far. I think especially early on, and especially in building up the lead, just let the running backs kind of take over, because again, you could literally walk up to Clay Helton before the game, based on how Georgia Southern's played so far this year, and based on Clay Helton's history. It seems like you could walk up to him before the game and say, "Hey, we're running the ball every play," and still rush for 200 yards on him. So yeah, I think doing that early on, like you said, is a great idea.
So here's another point to consider, and citing something that Jeff Rodriguez said a few weeks ago before the season began. Jeff made the point, and it's very much worth considering, that you know what, you shouldn't worry about burning Husan Longstreet's red shirt, because in the era of NIL and the era of the transfer portal, like, you're here to try and maximize the players that you have in the year or years that you have them. You can't really worry about a second year or a third year. You just need to go throw players into the fire, give them a chance. And so, in game one, week one, Husan Longstreet gets the second half. He got a lot of reps, got a lot of snaps. It wasn't a case of, the QB1 playing three and a half quarters, and then the number two just getting like one or two drives in the fourth. No, Husan Longstreet got a lot of playing time, as did John Ray Reed, as the backup to Killian O'Connor. So are we basically on board with Jeff Rodriguez's, assertion that, what, it's a new era, transfer portal, NIL, you're not worried about preserving players anymore. You let them loose, you throw them into the mix every game, because Husan Longstreet could be kind of a Swiss Army knife, change of pace player. You give him a specific package or a specific set of plays. Let's just turn him loose in the second half once again, and basically create the idea that he's going to be playing a few snaps, maybe even a few possessions in every game. So talk to me about not just Longstreet, but also the Reed O'Connor rotation at center, and how much playing time you think USC should find for each of these combinations: Maiava, O'Connor, and Husan Longstreet, and John Ray Reed.
Yeah, I mean, I think at this point, based on how they played him in the first game and just kind of how he looked, I would assume that, burning the red shirt is not on the table. And, to be quite honest with you, I don't think it should be. I think that at this point, earlier in the year, I could kind of see the argument for it. But I just think that based on how Husan Longstreet played, there's still obviously, and based on the combination of the talent he showed, but also some of the decision-making mistakes that he made, I think that there's a lot that he can learn from playing like Division I football games, like in game, just because, he was running guys over and, holding onto the ball for too long, and, making a couple of reads that I didn't feel were super up to par, but he showed a lot of natural talent, obviously. Like, he's super fast kid, looked even better running the ball than Maiava did. Has a really strong arm, and fits the profile physically and in terms of playing style of a traditional Lincoln Riley quarterback. And, the quarterbacks that Lincoln Riley has coached to Heisman trophies. So I don't know. I just think that, thinking back to almost a kind of Spencer Rattler, Caleb Williams situation at Oklahoma, Lincoln Riley wasn't going to redshirt Caleb Williams. Like, Caleb Williams, he knew had a lot of talent, and Caleb Williams ends up starting for that team after Spencer Rattler struggles. But Spencer Rattler was the Heisman favorite coming into the season. So, and he still wasn't going to redshirt Caleb Williams because he wanted to get him into games. And I think that again, just based on how Longstreet played, and this is not a knock on him. Like I said, there's a lot that he showed that was positive, and because there's a lot that he showed that was positive, I think that it's in the coaching staff's best interest to keep him entertained, put him into some games. Like, hey, we believe in your talent. We want to develop your talent. We're serious about developing it now. Thinking back to the USC women's basketball team, which is obviously a different sport and different situations, but there's a couple of 5-stars that left in the offseason, and it seems like they were frustrated with their lack of playing time. And I think that that's just kind of the reality of the era now is you just have so many teams whispering in your ear like, hey, they didn't play you. They don't believe in your development. Us over here, you'll become a starter immediately. Some like slightly smaller school, but that's still Power 5. It's like, hey, we believe in your talent. We'll make you a starter, and we'll also pay you, 7 figures. Not obviously for women's college basketball, but for college football, it seems like that kind of stuff happens all the time now. So I just think that because of that, it's in their best interest to play him. It's in their best interest to, continue to keep him engaged, make him feel like he can contribute to this team, and make him feel like their best interest is developing him and his future, and getting him to an NFL level as soon as possible. Because ultimately, the only way you can get players to stay at your school for as long as they can is if you, assuming that they're a player that wants to play in the NFL, is just kind of reassuring them that, hey, we're about your NFL development. And then the school gets some benefit because, the players do have a lot of power these days. So they're just going to, a lot of them are just going to take off if you don't treat them with the amount of respect that a lot of them feel that they deserve.
All right. Going to ask you a follow-up question, but first, it's the 15-minute warning. 15 minutes left in our first hour. We've had $15 come in, 10 from Jeff, 5 from Russ. So the other people in the chat have some work to do if you want to get a second hour of Ethan and Matt tonight. So anyway, 15 minutes left in the hour. Just want to provide that little notification there. All right, Ethan, so the follow-up. What about the center rotation between Killian O'Connor, John Ray Reed? Is this a week to cross-match? You put Reed with Maava, or is that just dumb? Like you just keep the ones with the ones, the twos with the twos? Do you do any mixing and matching? Do you give O'Connor more run because you want some continuity, steadiness, stability going into the Purdue game, going into your Big Ten schedule? How do you juggle the O'Connor-Reed center rotation this week?
I would think that if you truly believe that John Ray Reed could become the starting center down the line, or starting offensive lineman in any capacity, but especially starting center, you should be playing him with Jaden Maava in this game, and maybe switching it around, especially if you believe you're going to be up by just as much as you were in the last game, and kind of able to put in Hassan Longstreet at halftime or kind of right after halftime. But I don't know. I mean, Killian O'Connor played really well. He was the second ranked offensive lineman by Pro Football Focus in the game in both run and pass, but behind only Alani Noah, who also deserves a shout out for playing a great game. So, I mean, it really, I think, just depends on who Lincoln Riley believes in. Like, there is an argument for just continuing to play Killian O'Connor with Jaden Maava and letting that chemistry develop, just because, we talked a couple weeks ago when we were talking about the center rotation initially about how just kind of or it was last week on the pregame show, about how kind of jerking players around can really just be harmful to chemistry and be harmful to, just kind of developing momentum. And I just think if you really believe in Killian O'Connor and, he proved enough to you in that first game, maybe you keep them together. And then, that, because then John Ray Reed doesn't entirely feel like left out of the equation. If he's like Hassan Longstreet's personal center, it's almost like having a personal catcher in baseball. Like, I think of some baseball aces over the years that, there's a backup catcher on the team who it seemed like their sole job was to just be the catcher for, Tim Lincecum or Clayton Kershaw, or, you name it. So that could be an interesting way to kind of keep John Ray Reed in the loop. It's like, hey, if we get up big, you'll get in there, you'll get a lot of run. If we want to put in Hassan Longstreet for some gadget plays, or if, God forbid, Maava gets hurt, then we can, you'll be the center there. Because again, John Ray Reed played almost just as well as Killian O'Connor. I think he was ranked just a few below him in the Pro Football Focus rankings. And, there didn't really seem like a big drop off when he entered the game. So it's a good problem to have when you have two centers playing decently well through the first week. And so I would think if you're continuing to keep this a real competition, you mix it up. And that's what I'd lean towards after seeing them play pretty evenly. But if it's all about belief. It's all about who Lincoln Riley believes in, and I think we're going to find that out when we see how the center rotation's handled.
Yeah, it's a real in between situation for USC, because on one hand, this is your last cupcake game, then comes 9 Big Ten games plus Notre Dame. So this is your last game in which you get to really treat it kind of like a preseason game. I mean, they say there are no preseason games in college football, but essentially a cupcake game like this essentially is a preseason game. It's the last time to just throw everyone out there to experiment, to tinker with your rotations, your lineups, give your backups ample playing time, much like Missouri State. So there's that angle. It's your chance to play a lot of players, and you might not be able to do that at Purdue. But on the other hand, you might want to build some stamina. You might want to extend the starters a little bit more as preparation for that road trip to Purdue. Make sure that guys are ready to grind for 60 minutes against the Boilermakers. It's a very in-between thing. I think you definitely do want to give backups more work. You'll want them to have that work when you go into the teeth of the Big Ten season in October. Injuries are bound to happen. You want those backups ready to play when called upon. So this is the chance to sharpen those backups one more time before you go into the Big Ten. And yet you do want to kind of tell your number ones, especially if they are playing well, as Killian O'Connor did, hey, we're riding with you. We trust you. You're the guy, you're going to give us continuity. So a lot to juggle for the staff, and that's certainly going to be one of the bigger talking points coming out of this game. All right, Ethan, we also have to address the defense. So a lot of talk about offense. Let's now deal with the defense. What are you looking for on defense against Georgia Southern, whether it's a player, a statistical category, a trend, a pattern, Danton Lynn's plan, anything you'd like?
Well, I think one of the big storylines defensively is it sounds like a lot of players are set to come back. Because I think Jakeem Stewart practiced today. They're expecting Chasen Johnson to be back. So good updates on those guys. So obviously those players making their debuts is a potentially big storyline. And then I just think, some better reads in the secondary, limiting some of the bigger plays, some of the blown coverage obviously was a big story, because you kind of have a similar quarterback situation at Georgia Southern to Jacob Clark at Missouri State. You've got kind of a guy in J.C. French IV who's been around, not a lot of big schools, not a lot of big school experience, but has been around, led this team last year, and they were solid. They were 8-5, so they weren't horrible. And so he's an established starter returning to Clay Helton's offense. And they also got a pretty big transfer in at wide receiver, Camden Brown, who transferred from Auburn and is a redshirt senior. So he's a really experienced guy who, again, big program in Auburn that he came from. He is clearly Georgia Southern's leading receiver because he led them in receiving versus Fresno State and had a touchdown. So he should be J.C. French's go-to guy. So again, it's just like it's almost similar to the Maava argument. Like you've got like a little bit better version of Jacob Clark at quarterback, who has slightly more weapons at wide receiver, a clear kind of go-to guy among them who is an Auburn transfer. They also got a big name tight end transfer from Western Kentucky. So he's another guy who they added to the offense. But again, just a little bit better weapons, a little bit better quarterback play. So you want to see, well, theoretically, of course, we don't know until the game is played, but you just want to see a little bit better, a little bit of improvement on, the secondary's decision making is a big one, and their reads for sure. Don't want to see a blown coverage like last game. And then I think too, like in terms of the defensive line, especially if you have Jakeem Stewart, you have another big, scary athletic weapon there. I'd like to just see them finishing plays, because you had a lot of times where they were in the backfield and they were a step away from sacking Jacob Clark, or, a step away from getting a big tackle for loss, whatever it was, a step away from hitting him as he threw, whatever, you name it. It just seemed like they were in the backfield a lot, but they were a step away. Again, just seeing them a step faster, finishing plays, making those, marginal improvements. And again, kind of just like stepping up the stairs as, they play these lesser teams and as they build up for Big Ten opponents who are going to put a lot better offensive linemen out there, and a lot better wide receivers and a lot smarter quarterbacks, and with a lot better arm talent. So yeah, just kind of nothing too crazy, nothing too big, just improving on some of those small issues that they had in the game against Missouri State.
All right, we have one more segment coming at you, but first, a word from our sponsor here at the Voice of College Football. See you in a minute.
College football is even more exciting when you've got some action on the line, and the games are even better when you're cashing in. And the Voice of College Football is the place to be to get the greatest value. Start with my picks. 75% against the money line, 58% against the spread, and I've got a 40-plus year track record. 11-0 in the college football playoff for me last year against the money line, 8-3 against the spread. And I'm just the warm-up act. Steve Merrill of Wager Talk is our ace in the hole, show stopper. 7 years with the Voice of College Football, over 30 years in the industry. Steve gives us analysis on all the big games, but you can't miss Steve's weekly under-the-radar pick. 28-12 against the spread the last 3 years. You also get picks from some of our top analysts here at the Voice of College Football, including Corey Bratta, Matt Zemek, and Steve Dace. Check out those numbers. Become a YouTube or Patreon member for just $99 per month. Go to the main channel on YouTube, click join, and then select the betting tier. Do the same thing on Patreon. Make 2025 a winner now.
All right, so I haven't seen the line yet with USC, but hey, if you had USC minus the 36.5 against Missouri State, that ticket cashed very, very easily. So congratulations if you did have a USC minus 36.5 ticket. All right, so this episode is the Georgia Southern preview. So Clay Helton, obviously a major story. So we close with a segment that has a Clay Helton-like flavor, but it's not a Georgia Southern story. It's not a USC story. We are laughing at UCLA, right? What USC fan isn't laughing, having a good hearty belly laugh at the disaster unfolding in Westwood right now? It was almost shocking, almost, because we remember Deshaun Foster's really weird, bizarre Big Ten Media Days press conference a year ago. He just froze up at the podium. So, here's another snapshot of Deshaun Foster just seeming to be a little in over his head after UCLA loses 43-10 to Utah. Deshaun Foster watches film. After watching film, he talks to the media. Ben Bolch of the Los Angeles Times and Bruin Report Online both confirm this. We're not making it up. Deshaun Foster said, and I quote, "We were close. We were close. After losing 43-10, his team got ragdolled. His team got boat raced. His team got embarrassed. And then he says, we were close." Is this worse, Ethan Inman, than anything Clay Helton's ever said? Because we know that we couldn't stand Clay Helton's sunshine pumping, being optimistic after, the most brutal, ugly performance or defeat. Man, this is unbelievable.
Yeah. You set the table there super well, Matt. I couldn't believe it. Especially Deshaun Foster, to me, has established himself already this season. I started the show with a soapbox rant, and I think I'm ending it with one, because he's established himself to me as the most tone-deaf coach in college football. You have to understand that not only is he saying this after a 43-10 loss, but he's saying this to a group of local media members that he's completely lost, because he, at the beginning of the season, tamped down on all of UCLA's media restrictions. UCLA, you look it up, UCLA media members can't basically do anything now. They can barely do their job. They can't cover the team. So, and again, we're always rooting for the downfall of UCLA, but you got to have the backs of your fellow media members. So really, really a big bummer what he did to those UCLA media members. And then those same people who, he's treated like crap for the past couple of weeks. He wants to tell the story that UCLA was close when they lost by 33 points. It's not even like, oh, like, some crazy circumstance caused them to lose by 33 points. They got outgained 492 to 220. They got outrushed 286 to 84. They were 2 for 11 on third down, while Utah was 14 of 17. Like, there is no metric, no world, no universe, no delusional thought in which anyone would think that UCLA was close. There's no, I really don't understand how you could see that. It's certainly crazier than anything Clay Helton has ever said. And I'd even lump in a bit of revisionist history to last year, because we had Lincoln Riley saying we were close a lot after, some actually close losses, and media members at USC were frustrated with it because it's like, when does it go from we were close to we actually closed out games? But I will remind you that USC led every game except for Notre Dame in the fourth quarter. So Lincoln Riley actually has an argument to say we were close. Deshaun Foster got completely dominated in every sense of the word. Outside of Nico Iamaleava, they had 37 rushing yards. You never established the run game. The passing game had maybe 150 yards to boot as well. Like, I just don't, again, it's kind of like the AP poll voters. Like, people just, in today's sports landscape and today's media landscape, love to just operate on delusion. Like, there is no world. You were completely outclassed by Kyle Whittingham, who's a better coach than you. And like, UCLA fans and media members who are admittedly, kind of wishy-washy and neither here nor there, and, fair weathered, are calling for your firing after week one. So, and, this was a team that some people thought UCLA was going to win, having Nico Iamaleava, and they just completely and utterly got dominated. So I just don't, I mean, it's great for USC to see him being so delusional, but it's just really frustrating. It's got to be really frustrating if you're a Bruins fan and a Bruins media member to, go to this post-game press conference looking for answers for your fan base when you can barely cover the team as it is, and you have the coach saying, oh, we're really close. Like, give us some actual insight. Give us something to report on. Give us some hope that we can give to the fan base. No, instead we have to go and tell the Bruin fans that he said this ridiculously delusional quote. It's just, I don't even know what I'd do if I was covering UCLA. It's just, there's no way forward after that.
So here's the USC related angle to this story. And people might be scratching their heads. How is there a USC angle to any of this? Let's remember, Deshaun Foster inherited a group of defensive players at UCLA, which had been developed well by a guy named D'Anton Lynn. D'Anton Lynn is defensive coordinator in 2023. He coached all 4 of the UCLA defensive players who went to the NFL draft. And those 4 players who were NFL draft picks, I'm talking about Carson Schwessinger, Oluwafemi Oladejo, Jay Toya, former Trojan, but he transferred to UCLA, and Kane Medrano. D'Anton Lynn coached all 4 of those guys, and he brought them up. We saw how D'Anton Lynn improved UCLA's defense in 2023 in 1 year. And so those 4 guys were the beneficiaries of D'Anton Lynn's skill, quality, and overall player development acumen. So that got handed to Deshaun Foster on a platter. And full candor, I thought Deshaun Foster did a really good job with UCLA last year, because I was expecting UCLA to be 2-10. UCLA went 5-7 instead of 2-10. But now, like, after seeing this, I get it. Like, I see the light. It was D'Anton Lynn coaching up the Bruins so that in 2024, Deshaun Foster inherited 4 NFL caliber players on defense. And these 4 UCLA NFL draft picks, they all made their 53-man rosters. Kane Medrano and Jay Toya were back-end picks in the NFL draft. They were taken in the 6th and 7th round, but they made their 53-man NFL rosters. Medrano with the Washington Commanders, Toya with the Dallas Cowboys. So all 4 of USC's defensive studs who went to the draft this year, they all made their NFL opening day rosters. Not all of them as starters, but they all made the 53-man rosters. So that D'Anton Lynn gave that. He gave that to Deshaun Foster. And so no Carson Schwessinger on the field, you could see the difference. You could see just how awful UCLA was without a tackling machine such as Carson Schwessinger Also, Oluwafemi Oladejo at the edge spot, Jay Toya as a run stuffer. Like all those guys, they all filled specific roles, and they made that UCLA defense very competent last season. Deshaun Foster did not replace these guys in the portal, and he did not develop players within his program. So, like, this seems like a crisis. You know, we talk about not overreacting to one game. I think at UCLA, it's not an overreaction to say, whoa, like this team really seems shorthanded. And you know, UCLA plays UNLV this weekend. If UCLA does not win that game, 0-2, all right, and hasn't even played a Big Ten game yet. UCLA has to play Penn State. UCLA has to play Ohio State. Like, this is going to be a bloodbath, and UCLA is not going to make a bowl game, which, you know, with the Nico Iamaleava NIL deal, you know, like a bowl game was absolutely the minimum expectation for this team. And so if UCLA doesn't make a bowl game, not only does it just remove any sense of momentum or enthusiasm from the program, but it also means future recruits, future transfer portal prospects, they're not going to want to get within 10 million feet of Westwood, of Deshaun Foster. So, like, this could have a horrible domino effect. So, really, the bottom line is UCLA needs to extend Deshaun Foster. The same way that Bruin fans said, you know, hey, extend Clay Helton, keep him around forever. I think UCLA has really found something. It's found the ideal coach for USC. So that's kind of the cosmic connection with Clay Helton. But Ethan, any final thoughts on the importance of UCLA's game this upcoming weekend against UNLV? To me, it's absolute must win. If UCLA doesn't win it, like, the season's going to go up in smoke. Bruins in ruins.
I think it is must win, and I can't even confidently say that they're going to win it. I think that UNLV is in kind of that in that same category as Tulane, as one of the better non-Power 5 teams who has a chance to compete for a college football playoff berth. Because if I had to pick a team right now that was going to win the Mountain West, I'd probably pick UNLV after how awful Boise State looked in their first game against South Florida. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's – I mean, if I had to pick, I'd say it's more likely than not, actually, that UCLA starts out the season 2-0, because I think it's a must-win game for UNLV as much as it is for UCLA, because not as much of a must-win game, but it's a big boost to your college football playoff aspirations if you can take care of these bigger conference opponents. And I think that they're in position to do that because UNLV is a program on the rise, and like I said, they've looked great the past few years, and they have college football playoff aspirations this year. So a big potential disaster for UCLA this weekend. And then just to piggyback on your point about them losing all those valuable defensive players. I mean, people, I think, undersell just how valuable of a player specifically Carson Schweschinger was. And I'm a little bit biased because his sister is a good friend of mine. She actually goes to USC, was on my intramural volleyball team. So I followed him a little bit more closely than any of the other UCLA players. But he led the nation with 90 solo tackles. Like, he's as valuable as, and he, that's from the linebacker position, which, mind you, is like the quarterback of the defense. He's as valuable of a defensive player as you're going to see in the entire country. Was a borderline first-round pick, ends up going in the first pick of the second round. So he was a stud. I mean, losing him is like for USC a couple years ago, losing Jordan Addison and Caleb Williams trying to survive with not really a replacement at wide receiver. Like, that's kind of the equivalent to losing Carson Schweschinger at UCLA. So, and it's evident that Deshaun Foster didn't develop. So they're going to be in real trouble. And I really do think that losing UNLV is a possibility this weekend for sure.
All right, Ethan. So, folks, we're not doing a second hour. There was no $100 super chat tonight, but we do appreciate everyone who contributed, especially Jeff Rodriguez and Russ Campbell. Before we go, Ethan, just one word, a prediction. Michigan, Oklahoma.
Taking Michigan.
I'm taking Oklahoma. Veteran quarterback over the freshman. Another pick. Pete Carroll's Raiders, first Pete Carroll NFL regular season game, going to New England, going to Foxborough to play the Patriots. Raiders or Patriots?
I am taking the Raiders in that one.
I am taking the Raiders too. So we will see what happens. And we'll see what happens with Clay Helton's return to the Los Angeles Coliseum this Saturday, Georgia Southern. So Ethan and I will be here to talk about it on Sunday. And hey, just to let you know, we're probably going to start it at 5 Pacific, 8 in the East. But Ethan does have a previous appointment. So Ethan might kind of join the show midstream, maybe at 5:30. We might start at 6. We're kind of conferring on that. So, you'll get the notification, though, in terms of when the show starts. Ethan and I are going to hammer that out during the week. So it could be a 5 o'clock start. We might choose to start at 5:30, but we are bringing you our Sunday evening USC postgame show here at the Voice of College Football. Every Sunday, Ethan and Matt, in the evening, 24, 30 hours after the USC game, we've had a chance to digest it. We're coming at you with postgame coverage, and then come back here on Tuesday nights where we preview the next week's game. So Sunday, Georgia Southern review, and then next Tuesday it's going to be the Purdue preview. We look at Barry Odom, and we look at a certain Purdue offensive coordinator named Josh Henson. You might have remembered him somewhere. So that's going to be an interesting show next week. All right, so we'll see you Sunday evening. Ethan and Matt. For Ethan Inman, this is Matt Zemek. Thanks for supporting the USC channel here at the Voice of College Football. We'll see you Sunday, and fight on.